Medinsule. No.
Next trip. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're going to get started in just a few seconds. Just finishing up some technical stuff. Well, happy Sunday and welcome. Thanks for joining us. My name is Robert. Let's go ahead and get started. We were chatting amongst ourselves and let's go ahead and begin. Happy Sunday. Thanks for taking time out of your day to spend some time with us. Just let's go over a few things real quick. So we were doing an icebreaker question. Whenever we do our in-person tours in DC, we always like to get to know one another. But since we're meeting online, we'll try a similar type of exercise with all of you. So ask people, what's your first name, where you're connecting from, and what's your favorite dessert? So we've already had a lot of people chiming in with all kinds of delicious things that they enjoy eating. So feel free to type that in the Zoom chat or the Q&A. Let me check something on my computer real quick. Hold on for a second. Hold on for 1 second. I have to check something. Okay, I think we're in good shape. So we don't do a Zoom demonstration. These programs are just real quick. There's usually only a couple things that people sometimes need assistance with. So the audience will be in listen only mode or muted, except for myself and Edward. If you do want to raise or lower the volume on your session, you can check the settings locally on your own device. If you want to adjust the screen display so that the slides and the videos that we're showing take up the full screen, if that's not currently happening for you, look for something on your device called either view or view options, and you can click the side-by-side mode. If you have any questions or comments about our program, feel free to type those in the Zoom chat or the Q&A. Edward and I always get a kick out of reading everyone's questions and comments and thoughts, opinions, perspectives, et cetera, et cetera. The only thing to mention there is you won't be able to see each other's chat and comment items unless Edward or I approve them, because we get Zoom bombed on a regular basis by crazy people with nothing better to do with their time than try and disrupt our programs. So that's a story with that. So let's go ahead and get started. For those of you not familiar with us, for Washington, D.C. History and Culture, we're a nonprofit community organization. And for those of you I haven't met before, either online or in person, my name is Robert. I'll be your host. Oh, I just realized I didn't have my camera on.
Robert. Hey,
greetings from out in front of the White House. If you hear a noise, that's the wind blowing.
And change, yeah.
But the guest of honor today is our friend Edward, who's going to be walking us through one of more of his fabulous, awesome presentation. So Edward's actually been giving us a few presentations. We've really learned a lot. So some of the previous ones that he's done, which you can find on our YouTube page if you haven't seen them already. He started off with Shakespeare's London. That was the first one. Then there was readings from Shakespeare. Then there was Van Gogh, a reading of his letters, followed by the treasures of Tutankhamun. And last week was Buckingham Palace Stateroom. So again, if you missed any of these, not to worry, because you can find them on our YouTube page. So I sent the link out for that. I'll do it again later today, or actually probably be tomorrow. I'll send the link out for that. So if you want to check those out, feel free to do so. But today we're going to be talking about the Red Rose City, and Edward's going to guide us on a journey back to the ancient world of Petra. So with that, I will turn things over to Edward. Edward, it's all yours. Take it away.
Wow, brilliant. Yeah, I can share now. Great. So yeah, just thank you as always, Robert. Brilliantly presented. I guess just oh, great. So yeah, just a tiny bit about me. Some people were asking before. Anyway, so I studied classics, so Greek and Latin, sort of 12 years ago at Edinburgh University, and I've always been really fascinated with history. And yeah, a couple of years ago, I started touring, doing tours in London with people, so in-person tours. And then with the COVID situation, I kind of went online and expanded to whatever topic I was interested in or places I've been. And so yeah, that's kind of my thing. I'm really passionate about history and kind of meeting people and telling people about stuff that I find really cool, and hopefully you'll find it cool too. So
We always do.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thanks. So,
Edward's,
yes,
we're here with Edward's groupies today.
Yeah, Edward's. Yeah, right. Yeah. So this is the location of Petra here, this little red arrow in modern day southern Jordan. And I wanted to zoom out so far because it can give a good idea of why this area became so rich, why Petra itself became so wealthy. It's actually situated on various different ancient trade routes. So they're not trade routes for the same things today as they were in the past. But one very important route is called the King's Way, which came down from the south of the Arabian Peninsula. And it brought up various incenses like frankincense, which was really, really expensive. And it was used all over the Middle East and also the Roman Empire and beyond. But also Petra, you can see just up here, it was this very important node on this caravan trade route by land, which connected also to China, to India, to Africa. So all of this valuable produce, this gold, precious stones, textiles, ceramics, incenses, these were all coming, not all, but a lot of it was coming through Petra. And the people, the various different peoples in Petra could tap into that trade and take quite a large percentage of the, the money from that and became very, very wealthy. This is these frankincense trees that grew at least in the south of Arabia. And then this is the resin from that tree, which was used for all kinds of things, not just in churches or temples, but in people's homes for deodorant, or if you've had a particularly drastic bean supper the next day, you might light some frankincense in your household. So this was one of the main commodities that Petra was trading in, was acting as a caravan route for. Once you got to Petra from the wastes, the deserts of Arabia and southern Africa, then you still had to cross the Negev desert here. This is Petra just down here. And you crossed to get to places along the Gaza Strip, also to Alexandria in the north of Egypt, which were these main ports for the Mediterranean. So they would come by land, these caravan routes. The people of Petra, which of course I'll go into more, had great access to water, ingenious access to water, so could function as these caravan traders. And then all of this produce would then go out from these towns on to the rest of the known world. So this is just zooming in a bit closer. And there's this dark little strip running roughly north to south in modern day Jordan, which is these mountains, and nestled in these mountains is the valley where Petra is situated. It's called the Wadi Musa because in the Bible, Moses leaves Egypt with the Israelites who have been enslaved to seek the promised land. And on the way, he stops at various different points. And one of the points he stops at is this valley where he smacks on a rock and water comes out, which we'll revisit a bit later. There are various different names for Petra. So it's not Petra way back before the Greeks and the Romans had influence there. So Petra is a Greek word which means stone or rock. If you think of St. Peter, it's the same word. He was the rock of the church. Petra is built out of the rock, quite literally. So that's why it's got its name, from that contact with the writers and the conquerors from the Greek and the Roman world. But there are inscriptions in Petra of the word Rakhmu, and it can be thought that the name of Petra before it became quite Romanized about 2,000 years ago was Rakhmu, which could come from an ancient king, potentially. It's not really sure why it's called Rakhmu. And this is just a glimpse into the valley from Al-Sik, the canyon, one of the most famous entrances into the Petra Valley. So going way back, before the peak of culture in Petra, when you get the Treasury and these famous buildings, it's inhabited by the Edomites. Here you can see the kingdom of Edom, which is mentioned in the Bible. This is about 1200 BC till about 500 BC. So until about 2,500 years ago. And after that time, there's the Nabatean culture that starts to appear in inscriptions and in accounts by other authors. This is just quite a lovely remain of one of the religious icons of the kingdom of Edom. Before Christianity took hold in this area in the 300-400s AD, and before Islam in the 600s AD, this area was polytheistic. It had a multitude of different gods, and each had its place in the universe, which we will touch on as well. So part of the reason that it actually got rediscovered in the 1800s was because of this tomb of Aaron. So Aaron was Moses's brother, and Moses, when he went to Egypt, he tried to plea to the Egyptian powers to free the Israelites, but he found he wasn't a very good speaker. And so God said, right, Aaron will be your speaker. So Aaron had this powerful place in the Bible as being the speaker for the rights of the Israelites. And this is rumored to be his tomb, and it's still a pilgrimage site for various different faiths. And when Petra was rediscovered in the 1800s, part of the excuse to go there and find this forgotten ancient city was, oh, I want to go and see the tomb of Aaron. Yeah. And the tomb of Aaron is in the south on this mountain down here in the south. So this is getting even closer into this Wadi Musa, the valley of Petra. So yeah, if we look at this, you can see this line squiggling in. So this is actually the main entranceway into this ancient city. It's called Al-Sik, the canyon. There were other entrances to the north and to the south, but this was a very ceremonial entrance, and it seems this was much more used. It's very easily defendable, and it's also pretty spectacular. And a brief layout of the place before I get into more of the history and the kind of build up to it. So this is Al-Sik. This is just a kind of route to how you can explore it, and a rough layout of the size, which is roughly 100 square kilometers. So it's pretty massive. It's much more than you can do in a day, but if you do it in a day, of course, you get a very good feeling. And what I'll show you is largely what you can do in a day. So you enter here in the bottom half here, you go through Al-Sik, and then you come out into this valley, which is actually where the ancient city of Petra was. The city itself wasn't in the canyons where you get these famous, the Treasury and these famous buildings. It was out in the valley itself. In about 106 AD, Petra, also the region that Petra is in, it gets annexed, it gets taken over by the Romans quite peaceably. And you can see down here this region, Arabia Petraea, named after this city, Petra, which became the capital of this Roman province. But it was the Nabateans that built up Petra to its glory, which allowed it to then continue into the Roman era. And it still flourished right up until the 600s or the 700s AD, when it starts to fade for various different reasons. And the Nabateans are a group of people who have been lumped together in hindsight as the Nabateans. They probably wouldn't have seen themselves purely as Nabateans, but it's a nice grouping word for them. And this is one of the, well, it's the earliest written evidence of the Nabateans. And it comes from Diodorus Siculus, who's writing 2,100 years ago, writing about the Nabateans. They live in the open air, claiming as native land a wilderness that has neither rivers nor abundant springs from which it is possible for a hostile army to obtain water. They are exceptionally fond of freedom, and whenever a strong force of enemies comes near, they take refuge in the desert, using this as a fortress, for it lacks water and cannot be crossed by others, but to them alone, since they have prepared subterranean reservoirs lined with stucco. It furnishes safety. So it seems that the city of Petra under the Nabateans, who were roughly 400 BC until the 100s AD, when the Romans start to take over, they didn't necessarily live in Petra the whole time. It may have been more of a seasonal thing. So they're still keeping their nomadic roots of not settling in one place. So the city gets rediscovered. I will go more into the Nabateans. I just wanted to give you an overview to begin. The city was rediscovered in the 1800s by this guy, Johannes Burckhardt. And the city Petra was still known up until the end of the Crusades. In the early 1200s, there was a big final battle in the last crusade, and the Westerners were defeated, and the Islamic rulers took over this area. And Petra had already faded by this time to a kind of backwater, it seems. And so it seems largely forgotten, especially by Westerners, but it seems even by the Islamic cultures in power. And it attained a mythic status. So scholars wrote about it and they said, it's probably a myth. So this was very tantalizing for Western explorers. So this guy, Johannes Burckhardt, he was Swiss, and he actually heard about this rose red city, this beautiful city hidden in the mountains. And he got incensed with it. He learned Arabic and he disguised himself in this Arabic dress. He learned Arabic to such a degree that he managed to infiltrate. He managed to get into Petra, pretending that he wanted to go to the tomb of Aaron. And he arrived in Petra in the early 1800s. He only stayed for a day or two because his guide got suspicious of him. Obviously, he didn't want to spend too much time at the tomb of Aaron. He was like, let's go around the ruins of this ancient city. How fantastic. I'm going to draw this. And the guy's like, hang on a second. You're spying. I'm going to kill you. So he didn't get killed, but he had to leave. But this book, Travels in Syria and the Holy Land, it got out. And then this started a whole infatuation with this place, and people wanted to come there. And this is the beginning of it starting to be dug up and excavated and researched. When Burckhardt would have arrived, Al-Sikh, which today is quite nicely manicured, you can easily walk through it, was quite full of rubble. One of the theories about the collapse of the city of Petra was in the late 300s, there was a huge earthquake all around Europe. And there are mentions of Petra being heavily affected. And so perhaps there would have been all of this rubble in this space coming in. And the first thing he would have seen coming in through Al-Sikh was Al-Khazne, the treasury, which is actually not a treasury, which we'll get to, but these are some just old images of what he may have seen coming in for the first time. A couple of quotations about Petra before we get into its, the gory details. This is from a letter by T.E. Lawrence, also known as Lawrence of Arabia, who visited Petra in the early 1900s. Petra is the most wonderful place in the world, not for the sake of its ruins, which are quite a secondary affair, but for the color of its rocks, all red and black and gray, with streaks of green and blue in little wriggly lines, and for the shape of its cliffs and crags and pinnacles, and for the wonderful gorge it has, always running deep in spring water, full of oleanders and ivy and ferns, and only just wide enough for a camel at a time, and a couple of miles long. But I have read hosts of the most beautifully written accounts of it, and they give one no idea of it at all. So you will never know what Petra is like unless you come out here. Only be assured that till you have seen it, you have not had the glimmering of an idea how beautiful a place can be. And another poem here. This is by John William Bergen, who is an English poet, in a poem called Petra. It seems no work of man's creative hand, by labor wrought as wavering fancy planned, but from the rock as if by magic grown, eternal, silent, beautiful alone. Not virgin white like that old Doric shrine, where erst Athena held her rites divine. Not saintly grey like many a minster fane that crowns the hill and consecrates the plain, but rose red as if the blush of dawn that first beheld them were not yet withdrawn. The hues of youth upon a brow of woe, which man deemed old 2000 years ago. Match me such marvel save in eastern clime, a rose red city half as old as time. So I wanted to start with the water, because how could Petra flourish in this arid desert environment where apparently there are no big rivers and it doesn't rain much? It rains about 6 inches per year. It's really not much at all. We've had the same today in London. So when you go through Al-Seek, the canyon, you can see these canyons, I say canyons, these little incised canals along the base of the canyon. These are man-made water channels, which would channel water from various different sources. And as the quote from T.E. Lawrence showed, it would have been more luxuriant, there would have been more flora at the time because it was constantly watered. It's not constantly watered anymore. This old image, this old, lovely old painting shows the Al-Seek with water because every now and again, the rains would come and the water would flow down all these ravines. This is how the canyon was formed, from thousands of years of the water flowing. And the valley of Petra is actually a meeting point for these water flows. So it's a natural site for human habitation because it focuses the water that rains down. Here's an image of a flash flood happening. So there are still floods that happen in Petra. This is just outside the Treasury and the water's flowing right down where the travelers and the tourists usually are. Here another image of just outside the Treasury of the water just completely taking over and doing what it does, forming these channels out of the sandstone rock. So one of the ancient sources of water was Adi Musa, which is the spring of Moses, which is up on the mountains surrounding Petra. And this is the site where Moses with the Israelites struck the rock and water burst out of it, feeding the fleeing Israelites looking for the promised land. And it's still a shrine to this day. And this is apparently the rock that he struck, and a spring water still comes out. But this isn't enough to feed and to quench the thirst and to prepare the meals of the 20 or 30,000 people who were living in Petra at its peak about 2,000 years ago. If you imagine each family might need 4 or 5 liters of water a day, that's a lot of water. So how did they get the rest of the water and channel it into this whole city to feed it? Well, in recent decades, the archaeology has found these reservoirs in the surrounding hills around Petra, which tap into and collect the water from these occasional rains. And they form these reservoirs, which can then be tapped into and used as drinking and all the uses of water. So the Petraians, or the Nabateans who first built these, were incredible hydro engineers. And this is one of the key things that allowed both their city, but also their knowledge of the water systems of the surrounding area to provide water for the traders who were bringing their produce, and who the Nabateans were taking up to 25% of the value of these goods. And out in the surrounding areas, the Nabateans, they extended their use of this hydro engineering, and they built these huge underground reservoirs. So these are built out of the rock. They weren't built and then covered over. They were tunneled into and then dug out and then tapped, and then the water would flow into them. And these were really, really secret. the ancient Greeks, the ancient Romans, the Islamic invaders, they never found them. They've only been found by Western archaeologists and other archaeologists who actually were looking for them. Perhaps the local tribesmen knew of them. So they were hidden. They were a sort of a top secret weapon of this ancient culture of the Nabateans. And there's one great story that one of Alexander the Great's generals, he was on a conquest to conquer someone in Egypt, and they passed through the land of Nabateans. And in the desert, suddenly these Nabateans arrived with water and sold it to this Greek army for a huge exorbitant price, and then went off again, and then came back 3 days later knowing that they would need more water, and then they would give them water as if by magic, appearing with all of this water. This is one of the biggest reservoirs fairly near Petra. So it's incredible engineering to collect this precious resource. So let's start with Al-Khazneh, the treasury, because that's one of the first things that you really come across as a traveler there. It got the name the Treasury because one myth is that the pharaoh who got caught in the Red Sea or the Dead Sea, sorry, I forget, maybe the Red Sea, when Moses parted it, that the pharaoh actually survived with some of his treasures, but his treasures were too heavy to carry and pursue Moses. So he took them here and magically apparitioned this building and put his treasures inside. And its name is actually Al-Khazneh al-Farun, the treasury of the pharaoh, because of this legend, which is, of course, it's not true. But up there's an urn right at the top, like a huge jug, and it's got bullet holes in it. And the story is that Bedouin tribesmen a couple of 100 years ago were shooting at it with pistols and rifles to try and get the gold or the treasures out of this building, but it's never yielded any treasures. It's actually a burial. It's a tomb, and the entranceway into Al-Khazneh would have been much grander back when it was built. So the current best fitting theory is that it was built by Aretas IV, who was king of the Nabateans in the first few decades of the first millennium, so sort of 10 to 40 AD. And it was built on an existing gravesite. So recently they took the opportunity of less tourists to actually excavate down below where you can see other tombs. So the level that you stand on when you go there is actually about 6 meters above where the original floor was. Because of these flash floods, it filled up this space with sediment. So the whole area would have been a monument to the dead, to the probably important people from their past. It would have been a whole ceremonial ground. The area would have been paved with nice stones. So now you go in this kind of dirt square. It's not what it would have been like in the past. So you would have had to walk a few sort of 6 or 10 meters up to this temple, to this monument, mausoleum, a tomb of probably Aretas IV. How it was made, there's one tomb that is kind of half finished in Petra, which implies that they started from the top and chiseled down. So all of these monuments that you see, almost all of them, are chiseled out of the limestone, which has turned red from oxidization, giving it this rosy red tinge. So it's pretty amazing that they're all really carved out of the rock itself. So Al-Khazneh, the treasury, may have taken about 3 years to chisel out. So all of these columns, for example, these aren't structures put in place to hold up the building. These are carved out of the rock. I mean, it's amazing, really. So this is the lower half. So one of the amazing things about the Nabateans is that because of their network of trade and their contacts with the ancient Greek world, with the Roman world, with Indian, Assyrian, Persian, is this merging of different cultures. And that's one of the reasons why it became a UNESCO site, because it was seen as this valuable statement and testament to the coming together of different cultures. Because the Nabatean architecture which has this kind of peak moment with this building, is a converging of all different kinds of styles. So this is in the Middle East, but it has a pretty Greco-Roman feel. This temple is something straight out of Rome or Athens. And on the side leading in are two figures, which are Castor and Pollux. These are two figures from Greco-Roman religion, mythology, one of whom lived on Olympus. So he was with the gods, he was immortal, but the other was mortal and he lived in the underworld. So they had like 1 foot in the afterlife and 1 foot in, so 1 foot in paradise, 1 foot in hell, 1 foot in the spiritual realm, 1 foot in the human realm. And they were seen as this powerful iconography of death and the afterlife, of reincarnation. So there's this idea from far to the west of Petra, and then included in this monument of this king. Partly it's potentially impressing visitors who are coming. It's potentially showing off the widespread culture of that particular ruler. But it's a pretty powerful statement to have these ancient, powerful cultures all coming together in one monument. And at the top, again, there are various different cultures represented. This is a pretty unique look. There is some evidence that it's taken from palace architecture in Alexandria, which was a very powerful city 2,000 years ago, and it was Greek influenced. But there's this icon just above the central triangle, which is the theme of Isis, who was an Egyptian deity, Egyptian goddess of the afterlife, of life beyond death. So this all adds to its attribution as a tomb or as a mausoleum. This is the sun with 2 cow horns. This is the symbol of immortality, reincarnation of Isis. And also, one second, go back. Up here is a statue of Tyche, who's holding a symbol of abundance in her hand. And Tyche is a Greek goddess who was a symbol of the afterlife as well, but also as the blessing for a city, the patron goddess of cities and the abundance of cities. So you get these very different cultures from Petra, but using it as the mausoleum of a very important person. This is a coin made in Petra. You can see Petra written here with this statue of Tyche on it. So this is the king, Aretas the fourth. And one of the reasons why they think it was his mausoleum is that the amount of children that he had, his close family, matched the amount of rooms. I think there are 4 or 5 rooms inside the treasury. So inside it, you get this marvelous, looks like the surface of Jupiter or something, which are these wriggly lines that Lawrence of Arabia was talking about. No bodies have been found inside, and actually very few bodies are found in any of the 500 tombs that there are in Petra. So it's kind of mysterious why, but there are these rooms leading off it, which may have been these chambers for the different dead members of his family. You can see at the top here in this reconstructed image, the treasury leading out, and then out of Al-Sik comes this broad valley, the Wadi Musa, where there was the actual city proper of Petra. Because of the Roman influence, a lot of the buildings that survive are Roman, or they're quite late Nabatean structures. So not much actually survives of older Nabatean architecture. But luckily, the buildings from a peak building period, which is influenced by Rome, so under Aretas IV and beyond, are a lot of these very glamorous tombs here, the amphitheater, the main street leading down, and some of these buildings here, which we'll look into a bit. So this is leaving Al-Sik, and you pass by immediately many tombs. So all of these buildings with a little doorway and the pediments and different kinds of designs on each of them, they're all quite unique, are tombs. Many of them have little niches inside them. And so people aren't sure today what the burial practice was. Some very important people may have been buried completely whole. So there are some whole skeletons found, but more often they found bone traces, or they think that the practices of the Nabatean burial practice were similar to other in Persia, which was about leaving the body to the elements to be pecked apart by birds and the weather, and you just leave the bones, and these bones can then be buried. That's a much smaller space. So there are about 500 tombs, but thousands and thousands of people lived in Petra. So only the very wealthy would have been able to pay for these kinds of tombs. But still, it seems that probably generations were put inside each tomb. So these tombs weren't just made for one person, they were made for whole families. And as you look to your right, then you see another whole stretch of these tombs. And there's a very essential Nabatean, very particular quality to a lot of the tombs, which are quite early on in the Nabatean culture. So around 200, 100 BC, which is this look here with this step coming down on each side above a basic doorway in the middle. You can see this one already has some Greek Roman influence with these columns and this triangular pediment. But this one here, for example, this is seems to be older, and it has this Assyrian influence. So these kind of step image, this is very Assyrian and Persian in its look. So again, this interesting mix of these different cultures coming together in this very trade orientated merchant city. This is a fantastic tomb that I'll talk more about in a sec, but this is the palace tomb, one of these monumental ones just on the right as you come in opposite the amphitheater. And it wasn't just in Petra. So this Nabatean style, it spread to outside areas around Petra. This is Qasr al-Farid, where you can see this amazing single lump of sandstone, and cut into it is this beautiful tomb. And this has Egyptian influences. So this heavy pediment here and these square columns, this is much more Egyptian in its style, with this step from further east. So this more Assyrian and Persian influence. So again, this fascinating blend of these different cultures in their funerary monuments. And you can see more of them. This is just the pediment here. They had eagles often above. There were eagles, I forgot to say, eagles at the top of the treasury. Eagles were seen as this creature or spirit that would take away the soul of the dead. And here as well, you can see this Nabatean architecture at Ma'in Salih in Saudi Arabia. Again, how far this Petraean Nabatean architecture had spread. By the way, the Nabateans, it's not really sure where exactly they came from, but they replaced the Edomites. And the word Nabatean may come from Nabaioth, who was a character in the Bible, I think one of the sons of Isaac or Moses, I forget exactly which. So that may be why they're called the Nabateans. But yeah, it's a whole kind of topic of debate. So then you walk further in, and on the left, you start to approach what looks a bit like a quarry, but is actually this amphitheater, which was built in the time of Aretas IV, so roughly 30 AD, at this peak building time, this huge building program, when many of the big monumental buildings come from. And it's a pretty massive amphitheater. And again, it's carved out of the sandstone itself. Apart from this front, which would have been about this high, the whole thing is carved out of the rock. And there were, it seems, tombs there before it was built. And the amphitheater replaced these tombs and left some above, but it kind of intruded into the landscape. It's Roman inspired. So Rome had quite a lot of dealings with the kingdom of Petra at this time, but it didn't control Petra. It wouldn't do until 106 AD. So this amphitheater could fit about 8,000 or 9,000 people, which is pretty amazing. And it looked out over the main tombs of Petra, the Nabatean royalty. And there would have been performances, theater, religious rites, important ceremonial things happening here. But it's pretty amazing that it survived so well. You can see here that it looks out over these main tombs, especially this area over here, which I'll get to, are these very, very important, some of the most elaborate tombs apart from the Treasury tomb. So just to go back to this image, we're just standing here outside the amphitheater, and you see it overlooks the whole of this very important area of the Nabatean royal burials. So yes, across the way, then we come to these pretty spectacular tombs carved out of the rock. So imagine the feelings of, you know, Johannes Burckhardt coming here after maybe 500 or 600 years of no Westerner, no one really being there and taking account of it, apart from the local tribesmen, and seeing this beautiful architecture carved out of this red rock. So this is called the Urn Tomb, and it seems that it was for royalty, perhaps one of the sons of Aretas IV, because of inscriptions that have been found in there. And inside, it again has this marvelous swirling patterns in the rock, and various Christian images have been found there, like altarpieces and crosses, and also accounts, written accounts, show that perhaps this building was used for the bishop of Petra. So in the 300s, 400s, Petra became Christianized. It was probably one of the first places to actually become Christian, because it was very close to Constantinople, part of the Byzantine Empire, and it was ruled by the Byzantine Empire in the 300s, 400s, 500s, 600s before Islam took over in the mid 600s. So this would have been a Christian church for some few hundred years. Here's a lovely panorama of these other quite elegant tombs. So this one is called the Silk Tomb, and it's called that because of this very silky quality of the marble. Sorry, not marble, the sandstone. So it really looks like waves of silk going over it. And you can see again this mix of this more Eastern style of this step coming down, and then this more Greco-Roman style with these rounded columns. This is the Corinthian tomb, named because it has Corinthian columns with these flowery tops on it. And it's one of the most similar to the Treasury, with this round building in the middle. So perhaps this is again inspired by palace architecture in Alexandria. It's kind of an odd tomb because it's asymmetrical. It's got doors here, here, and in the center, but these other two parts are kind of blocked off. So it's just kind of an odd tomb. And again, it's not known exactly who was buried there, but there was a lineage of kings after Aretas IV before the Roman annexing in 106. So it may have been for a very important king or a noble. I just love this view from the 1800s of this area of these tombs that we've just been looking at. Again, showing how spectacular it would have been to kind of stumble into this valley and see these places broken in time, you know, carved out of the rock. And then this is the palace tomb, perhaps built for Obodas, who was one of the sons of Aretas IV. And it's pretty monumental. I mean, it's massive, and it's got 3 different layers, each of a different kind of architecture. But this is late on in the Nabatean culture. And I say Nabatean because when the Romans take over, it starts to change, really. It becomes more Romanized. And this is very Greco-Roman in its style. There's hardly any of the kind of older Assyrian, more Middle Eastern feel to it. And there's this tomb, which is actually for a Roman general who was in charge of Petra for some time in the 100s AD, after it had become a Roman province of Arabia Petraea. So it's just quite amazing to see this far-reaching Roman general buried in this desert environment. And then there's the pyramid tomb. So this isn't in the same place, it's in a different place. But this shows the strong influence from Egypt. And these obelisks were actually aniconic. So part of the religion of the Nabateans pre-Christianity was aniconic. So not showing the icon, not showing the face or the body of the deity, but showing some kind of representation of the deity or of a departed soul. So these obelisks are actually the departed souls of the dead. So it's thought that 4 people are buried in these tombs because there are 4 obelisks there, or 4 families maybe. Obelisks in the burial sense are used as this aniconic. In Egyptian obelisks, you know, with inscriptions on them, they serve a different kind of purpose. And then just another view where we were just looking at of these amazing tombs. A bit about the earthquake. In the 370s AD, there was this huge earthquake that shook many different parts of Europe. And in many of the houses in Petra that they've been excavating, they found crushed pottery and other sort of crushed and crumbled monuments. And they think that in the 370s, this big earthquake did quite a lot to reducing the power of Petra by crumbling a lot of its infrastructure. So then, leaving the tombs and the amphitheater behind, you then walk down along this main street that was actually this ancient caravan route, pre-Roman, pre-Nabatean, going through this valley, which the Romans then built up in the 100s AD. And this is what you then walk along. And it's actually a pretty well preserved street. At least some of the paving is quite well preserved from the Roman times. And it would have been a colonnaded street. So right down all the way to this gate at the end, it would have been this colonnade of these columns. And in these arches would have perhaps been shops and the daily life happening along this main street. And especially on the left here, the recent archaeology has found quite a lot of monumental buildings, ceremonial, civic, economic buildings. And I wanted to look at one of those in particular, which is just down towards the end on the left. And suddenly this platform arises from the street with different tiers of steps leading up to it. And it's a huge economic, ceremonial temple complex. No one knows exactly what it's for. But there were different agoras, different marketplace spaces or wide open spaces that probably would have been some kind of agora by the Roman standards of cities. They had these big open marketplaces in the center on these main streets. So it seems that this was some kind of marketplace or various different marketplaces with a huge temple right at the end here. And again, not sure exactly who was honored there. This may have been a temple to the Roman gods, because when the Romans conquered a place, they would expect the conquered peoples to, at least in part, worship the Roman emperors. They could also worship their own gods, which they did in Petra. There are these Roman Nabatean mixes of deities, but they were expected to honor the Roman emperors too. One of the more interesting things is going back to the water systems of ancient Petra. You can see here in the lower half, these big channels down here, which are actually filled with water. And also underneath a lot of these floors, they found water channels leading underneath all of these spaces. And so what they built up is a kind of image of a lot of water in different kinds of places. So this very dry desert basin, which gets water every few times a year, and that they channeled it and made it a spectacle. So they found basically pools, whether or not they were swimming pools or sort of fancy decorations or not. But this was a kind of lush city center with waterworks, with water flowing right through it. It's quite funny to compare it to somewhere like Las Vegas, which has a similar thing right in the middle of the desert, and yet it has this huge show of water, this abundance of water. So it became obviously a very powerful place under the Romans. It continued to flourish under the Romans, and it was the capital of Arabia, Petraea. Here's just a recreation of what this temple structure may have looked like. Yeah. In this temple ceremonial civic structure, there's an interesting sculpture on one of the columns, which is this elephant, which is very similar to something like Ganesha, this Indian deity. So again, because this is pretty unheard of in other Assyrian or Greco-Roman architecture, it seems some kind of influence from India. And one of the interesting theories about some of the designs of the tombs and the inspirations for these different designs in Petra is that different communities of merchants would be sent off to different areas of the world in order to be able to barter more efficiently. If you have someone already in Rome and then you send your incense there knowing what the price is before, then you're going to get a much safer deal than just sending it there with no contacts, and then you get sent back or it's devalued or something. So this is one of the basis for these colonies, that they had people in these far off places who were Nabatean, and they were worshipping Nabatean gods, and that they brought back themselves or their families to be buried in Petra, that Petra was a kind of burial center, like an important Mecca almost, and that these different styles that you see in these different tombs and this different architecture are from these different places that these people lived. So it's an interesting theory, but it's still kind of ongoing. So this is this colonnaded street that I was just taking you down, and then this monumental kind of temple structure here. And then right down the end is this temple, but it leads through this gate. So today the gate is pretty run down. It's a Roman gate built under the Emperor Hadrian, who toured around all of the Roman Empire in the mid-100s AD and came to Petra. You can see two kind of Roman soldiers here as part of the tourism. We don't know exactly what it looked like, but these gates were meant to embellish the city, to make it spectacular, to make it fit in with this Roman imperial grandeur. And actually, there's a beautiful surviving Roman gate in Jerash, which I think is also in Jordan. I'm not sure exactly, but it's pretty spectacular that it survives like this. So one can imagine, that this gate in Petra looked something similar, made to embellish the glory of Rome. And just down the end is the Qasr al-Bint temple. So this is one of the best preserved Nabatean buildings. So this is an earlier building than the purely Roman buildings. And you can see it down here at the end. So this is a Nabatean center of worship. And who was worshipped here was a deity called Dushara. So Dushara was one of the sort of the king of the gods, the principal gods in the Petraean religion. He compares to the god of war, Ares, in Greek mythology, but also to Zeus, king of the gods, Jupiter in the Roman religions. But before he became Romanized and took on a form, before he became iconic, he was an-iconic. And he's represented by these square stones that you can see all over Petra, particularly as you enter through Al-Sik and the entranceway beyond the Treasury. You can see these big stone rectangles and squares. These were symbols of Dushara. Dushara was the god of the earth. He was the god of the sky, the god of the sun. He was the god of life, basically. So these stone solid structures were seen as these powerful symbols of Dushara. And many of them, it seems, were sacrificial sites. So people or animals would be sacrificed on top. I didn't mean to say people. I don't know if people were sacrificed there, but I think it was probably mainly animals. So this is Dushara in his more sort of Greco-Roman form after the Roman conquest, as the Roman culture started to bring him in and combine with different Greco-Roman deities. But yes, these rectangular pediments you can see everywhere. Again, this is another image of Dushara here. A temple to Dushara has actually been found in southern Italy. So this gives again credence to this theory of different, different peoples of the Nabateans in different areas around the world and collecting them back in their burial sites in Petra. But it's pretty amazing to have this temple to Dushara in Italy, or at least elements of Dusharan worship are found in a temple in Italy. I shouldn't say it's a Dushara temple. And here a couple of quotes about this religion. The Arabs serve I know not whom, but I saw the statue, which was a square stone. Theos Eris Dushara, this is the god Eris in Arabic Petra. They worship the god Ares and venerate him above all. His statue is an unworked square black stone. It is 4 foot high and 2 feet wide. It rests on a golden base. They make sacrifices to him, and before him they anoint the blood of the sacrifice that is their anointment. So as in Al-Sikh, for example, you can see again these rectangular niches and these rectangular stones cut out of the rock, which represent these aniconic deities. So the last monument I wanted to look at is up on one of the hills around Petra, and it's called the Monastery. It's not actually a monastery. It got the name monastery because in later Byzantine eras, they found, from the Byzantine era, they found remains of religious Christian iconography. And it's a very big complex. It's not just this building. So it's thought that the original purpose of it was a kind of religious cult complex for one of the sons of Aratas IV, potentially, someone called Obodas. But like Al-Khazneh, the Treasury, it's beautiful how it survived so well. And it's enormous, it's huge. So inside are again these various rooms with this lovely cutout stone like we saw in Al-Khazneh. May have been for the whole family of Obodas. But doing this along with the center and the amphitheater and the tombs, it is possible in a day to walk around these particular sites. Here is again just to show, compared to humans, how enormous it is. And again, it's all completely carved out of the rock, and it's got this fascinating, very particular Nabatean style to it. So I wanted to end just by reading this poem again. I think it's quite lovely and a nice way to end. It seems no work of man's creative hand, by labor wrought as wavering fancy planned, but from the rock as if by magic grown, eternal, silent, beautiful alone. Not virgin white like that old Doric shrine, where erst Athena held her rites divine. Not saintly grey like many a minster fane, that crowns the hill and consecrates the plain. But rose red as if the blush of dawn, that first beheld them were not yet withdrawn. The hues of youth upon a brow of woe, which man deemed old 2000 years ago. Match me such marvel save in eastern clime, a rose red city half as old as time. So that's the end of the little tour / talk. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for joining.
Edward, once again, that was awesome. Thank you so much.
Robert, can you give me 1 sec? I just need to go.
Of course.
I need to go to the bathroom. Very sorry.
Okay, no problem. I'll
give me 1 sec.
Keep the audience entertained while you're gone. Hi, everyone. Well, thanks again for joining us. If you have any questions or comments for Edward, you can let them put them in the Zoom chat or the Q&A, and we'll continue on in just a little bit. One of the things I wanted to ask Edward, so Edward is a London-based professional tour guide, and I was going to ask him what the status of his in-person tours are. The last time I spoke to him a week ago, he said they was kind of still working on when he would be able to start those back up at some point in time in the near future. So I will ask him about that. But if you have any other questions about our topic of the day or anything else you want to let us know, feel free to type those in the chat in the Q&A, and we will continue on.
Allora, sono tornato.
Oh, welcome back.
Hey.
So while you were gone, I was telling people that you are a London-based tour guide, and
Yes.
had it a week ago. I asked you if there was any kind of updates on when you might be starting your in-person tours again, and you kind of let us know what was going on with that. But for those who weren't here for that last week, or if there's anything changed, what's the latest on the Edward in-person tours in London?
Yes, I'm starting again. So within a few weeks, I'm just preparing now what I'm going to do and how I'm going to do it. I'm kind of easing into it. So I'm planning my first one, I think, in 3 weeks' time.
Oh, terrific.
Just for my local London groups. But whoever's subscribed on my email list, then if you're not, feel free to leave your email in the chat and I'll add you to my list. I will just send you the email with these online tours, which I'll keep doing, but also inform you of the physical in-person tours.
Oh, terrific. Any idea what some of the first in-person tours in London might be on? What topics?
I'm thinking a literary tour of Bloomsbury, which is an area of London, very lovely with lots of green squares, lots of literary history. So that'll be really nice. Yeah. Or something more historical, like something more medieval. I'm not quite sure yet.
Okay, there were a lot of comments about how amazing this site is. Is it like any particular thing that surprises people when they come here? It was really interesting.
I think
about
the size. I think
the
the
water.
size of it. I think the size of it. I mean, it's 100 square miles. It's kind of enormous. I mean, yeah, I think the size of it, and especially when you come later in the day, the light is just so beautiful that I think people hear, oh, the rose red city, but in the daytime it's kind of yellowish because of the sun, and then in the evening or the early morning it just takes on this kind of magical quality. I think that often blows people away.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah, I personally thought it was really interesting learning about the water situation.
Yeah, it's incredible, right? The hydro engineering.
Yeah, really, especially since it was lost for so many years. So yeah, if anyone, now that Edward's back, if you have any questions.
So we'll get to the chat. I just wanted to put just my email here. If anyone wants to join my email list, you're welcome to drop your email in the chat and I'll be able to see that later. Donations very welcome. Yeah, just that's my PayPal address here. I don't have, I'll put it in the chat just to do that now before I start answering questions. But if you're, yeah, if you want to join my email list, then you're very welcome to do that. Just drop your email there.
Maybe someday you'll lead a guided trip to this site.
Sorry?
Maybe someday you'll lead a guided trip to this site.
Oh, maybe anything's possible. Yeah, anything's possible.
There's a couple people asked.
So Carol is saying it's not sandstone soft. How did it all last so long? Well, yeah, it's kind of amazing that the Treasury lasted. I mean, one of the reasons it lasted is because it's quite shielded from the rains in this kind of closed off cliff space. But because the level was so much lower, it avoided these flash floods. But it didn't all last so long, really. I mean, a lot of the other tombs I showed you are pretty worn down and not much remains in the actual city center. So it didn't all last so long, really. I mean, the monastery also lasted pretty well because it's quite high up and it doesn't have these sort of flash floods coming through it. Yeah, but sandstone is pretty soft, yeah.
Hold on, I'm going through all these.
When discovered, weren't a tribe living on the land outside of Sieg? Yeah, I mean, yes, there was a Bedouin tribes who were living there, and they were living in the tombs up until the 1980s when it became a UNESCO site. And actually now during COVID, when they've had to resort to going back into the tombs, even though it's technically illegal now. I read that some of them have gone back inside the tombs because they can't, there's no tourism, and that's their main role. So the Bedouin tribes, they had or have a priority over tourism because they were living there before and they were removed. But they said, well, you can have priority over tourism. So if you rent a horse or a donkey or a truck, then you'll likely be renting it from Bedouin tribesmen if you go there.
Oh, that's interesting. Everyone's getting innovative with COVID.
Yeah. Does Ed do tours outside the UK? Only online so far, but I've only been a tour guide for about 3 years. So very happy to, entertain any kind of possibility. Yeah. And what do the inside spaces look like? Very much like the Treasury, which I showed you inside. It's amazing that they cut out these quite geometric sort of cubes out of these rocks for these rooms inside, which have this marbling around them. But the inside spaces, none of them have kind of furniture or ornamentation, particularly inside. They're quite simple rooms inside with niches often for burials, it seems, for burials. How many days do you recommend staying there to see everything without rushing? I mean, of course, it depends on how much you want to go into it. But I mean, I was there for a day and I was sort of a lot younger. So I would have spent about maybe 2 or 3 days nowadays going there. But yeah, some places are really high up, so it takes a while to walk to them.
That's always a tough question to answer because, like, when you go to an art museum, some people could stay for like 2 hours and some people could stay all day. It just really kind of depends on the person line.
Right. Yeah, Jane was saying that it was a really tough climb up to the monastery. Hope it's safer these days. Yeah. Yeah. Let's see, any more questions? How much time? Yeah. When and why did people leave Petra? So yeah, I didn't talk about this so much. One of the main reasons was, well, a couple of reasons, was that when it became part of the Roman Empire, Rome built all kinds of different roads and had different trade centers set up that were easier to reach. And so that's one reason why Petra started to disappear in the 300-400s AD under Roman rule, was that these different centers of trade networks moved to places like Bosra, for example, north of Petra. Also, another reason is that when it became Islamic, it wasn't on the way to Mecca, and it sort of fell to the wayside a lot. Also, sea navigation, sea trade picked up a lot, got much more efficient. And so people didn't need to go by land as much anymore. So these different kinds of reasons. Also, this earthquake in the 360s was destroyed, it seems, quite a lot of the buildings. Yeah. 3 holidays to Petra booked. Wow. Oh, but all have been cancelled. Ooh, sorry. Well, sorry, Sue, but I'm glad you enjoyed today. Thank you for all your email addresses. Lovely. Bloomsbury, yes. Okay, let's see.
Edward, just on a personal note, what's kind of on your wish list as far as places that you want to travel when the kind of world returns to normal?
Well, I actually want to go places a bit closer to home. I've got into cycling a lot recently, like bike packing with like a tent on my bike. And I really want to go to Cornwall and go around the historic sites and also the beaches in Cornwall, because I was thinking like, I want to go to Spain and get a tan. And I was like, well, I go to Spain actually. Like Cornwall's got loads of nice beaches, and I don't know. And also Paris. I really want to go. I've been to Paris before, but I want to go again with a kind of new eye and just absorb the city a bit. Yeah.
That's cool. We actually have a couple people joining us from Paris today.
Oh, bonjour. Bonsoir.
Chat.
So, I'm just trying to read the questions, but I am seeing some thank yous, and so thank you very much for saying thank you.
Someone asked you, is that a David Roberts watercolor in the background?
What? In my room?
Yeah, I think I'm assuming it's in your room. They asked it. That's a David Roberts watercolor.
Oh, what, the London Bridge, the Tower Bridge, or the bull?
I'm assuming, I didn't see anything in your presentation that looked like it might be a watercolor, so I'm assuming that's what she's.
The bull. No, the bull's by Michael Kenning, but I don't know.
Okay.
Don't think so. How do I? Someone said, how do we get on one of your tours? Well, I saw you put, this is Jill A, you put your email address there. So I'll just be sending you for the next, however long I keep doing them, I'll just be sending you an email every couple of weeks with what I'm doing, and you'll see it there. I have a meetup group, which you can join by, but you can also just write to me from my email address, which you'll get from my emails. Now I have your email, and then you can just say, I'm coming to London in September. Like, what can we do? Are you available? And so just write to me. Anything's possible.
As long as it's not in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, right. But even then, I mean, we can meet outside 30 people. So unless you have 31 friends you want to bring with you.
Is that the current restriction in London? Up to 30 people can meet? Oh, okay. Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah. And yesterday I saw literally 30 people in the park, all talking, people using it to the max, you know.
Oh, okay. That's cool.
What time of the year? Well, I mean, I went in sort of May time, and it was pretty hot and pretty busy. But if you go in, I guess October would be pretty good because it's warmer and cooler. But I guess in and around, before and after summer, I guess, just because it's so hot then, and maybe there are more tourists. But I'm not an expert on when's the best time.
Anytime is a good time.
Yeah. Evelyn Bucaro, how much is the cost of a tour? How many hours? If you mean mine, I do typically 2-hour tours with time in the pub afterwards, however long people stay. The cost varies. You know, if you're coming with a group, then we can talk about it. Usually it's about 15 pounds for a person for 2 hours, 15 to 20, depends on the season. So I think it's pretty reasonable for 2 hours. But yeah, again, it's kind of flexible, so we can talk about it. Are there any books or videos you recommend to learn more about Petra? Yes, I watched one on YouTube. I forget what it's called, but if you type in Petra, it's a lot about the water. I mean, that's where I got a lot of the pictures for the water systems from. It's a really interesting video. There's an audiobook. If you have Audible, then I listened to a really good one. It's just an hour long. It's a summary of Petra. It's really useful. It's just called Petra. I have a book, but it's very archaeological. It's kind of quite niche. It's all about the different stone types and stuff. So I don't think you'd like that so much. But I didn't read one particular book, sorry. But yeah. Sorry, Cecilia, I couldn't help you in more detail there. Ooh. So I'm going way back in the chat here. Do we have any other questions, recent ones? New. What are you listed as in Meetup? That was John. Do you have, Robert, did you put my Meetup stuff on?
Yeah, it's in the event description. So if you want that information, it's listed in the event, all the event descriptions that we do with Edward.
Right. Oh, I think I'll stop sharing. Shall I put my Meetup just in the chat, just in case?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll do that now. So, manage group. Frick. Okay, here we go. So I'll put it in the chat here. So this is my Meetup group. Hopefully you can join through that. Harvey, what was the Treasury used for? Well, originally it seems it was a tomb for a king, potentially Aratas IV, because of some coins found there and some other inscriptions. So it was used to store bodies. It may have been a kind of sanctum place. So in some Roman burials, they would have, worshipping at the place. So it would have been potentially a ceremonial place too, where it would have been actively honored. But it seems it was a tomb originally. How long did it take to carve some of the tombs? Kitty Fryer. Well, the Treasury one, they think 3 years. 3 years to carve that. And that's not the biggest one. So 3 to 4, 5 years perhaps, but maybe a year or two for smaller ones, perhaps less. And from the top down, it seems. I'm posting the Meetup in the chat, so hopefully you can see it. I don't know if all panelists can see my chat, but hopefully. What tools used to carve? Oh gosh, I think I did watch that, but Honestly, I can't really remember if it was basic iron or copper tools. I think it was metal, but I can't remember exactly. And a hammer. I'm sorry. Yeah. Oh, someone's saying we can't see the chat because we're panelists. Oh.
Oh, Edward, if you paste it in and then change it, there's like a little blue thing to change from all panelists to all panelists and attendees.
Oh, there we go. Oh, okay. Now I did it. All panelists. I didn't know that. Oh, nifty. Okay. I'll chuck my email in there as well for all panelists and attendees, which you can use to contact me, and also for any PayPal tips you fancy giving. Who did the Nabateans replace? The Edomites. The Edomites, who were essentially a similar kind of tribe who were involved in the same kind of trade caravans that the Nabateans are involved in. But the Edomites seem to have got replaced or conquered a bit by Babylonians in about 600 or 500 BC. Bye, Caroline. Enjoy your yoga class. Thank you. Did Nabateans have slaves? Good question. I didn't read anything about them having slaves, but I didn't read someone saying they definitely didn't. I don't know. It doesn't seem likely. The Nabateans were quite self-contained, it seems, in the days before the Roman conquest. So when the Romans had conquered in 106 AD, potentially, but I don't know, to be honest. Good question, though. If they went from the top down, what if they made mistakes? Are there any mistakes? Well, yeah, if you look at the Treasury, if you look at an image of the Treasury, it is a little bit kind of bent. It's not a kind of perfect form. So yeah, they kind of did make mistakes. Yeah, it's not perfect. I don't know about other particular mistakes, but if you, again, also if you look at the Treasury on the side, there are loads of square holes, which they think were for the construction scaffolding, to put the scaffolding in as they went down. Yeah, but that's a theory. Wow. Great questions. Great questions. What other cultures did the Petraeans encounter? Well, it's not known if they encountered China directly, but they were involved in transporting things along the Silk Route from China to other parts of the world. Seems India, there are accounts of there having ports in India, Rome, Greece, peoples in Egypt, Africa, Southern Africa, other parts of Asia, like Middle East, like Persia, the Assyrians. I don't know the full extent, but they were certainly very, very, very wealthy, which is part of the reason why Rome wanted to annex them, to be the income takers, you know. It can be visited without a tour. I went without a tour. I'm pretty sure you can. Yeah, today still, I think, yeah. In Petra. What was their diet? Oh, well, they had agriculture. Their watering system allowed agriculture, but they weren't allowed. The Nabateans disallowed wheat and wine. But they had fish, for example. They brought fish in because they were quite wealthy and they could, from different seas. They ate meat, and there's evidence of different kinds of plant and fruit growing in and around the region around Petra. So they weren't starved by any means. I don't know the exact kind of daily diet, but they did grow stuff. How is the flooring held up on the second floor? If you mean the Treasury, it's just carved out of the rock. It doesn't need to be held up. And there's no second floor inside the building. It's just the rooms on the lower floor. So it's all just carved out of the rock. It doesn't need It doesn't need that support. It's not wide enough that it might cave in from above. Was this recorded? Yes, I hope so.
Yes.
And Robert will send an email, I guess, in a few days with the link to it. So
Yeah. Yep. We sure will. It won't be today, but
Great.
it'll be early next week,
Yeah.
hopefully.
Yeah, awesome. Elisa's saying she can't see any of the other comments, which is strange.
Well, yeah. So we talked about that earlier. So if someone types a comment in, it can't be seen by other people because that deters Zoom bombers that like to come to our program.
Right, I see.
We didn't have any
So
Zoom bombers today, but Edward's last program, someone came in and was typing all this. They typed like 50 spam messages in the comment.
God. Oh, so that's why, Elisa, it's a security thing just for this, because there are so many people, I think. So sorry about that. What sort of research do you do about a place before planning a personal trip? Oh, all kinds. I mean, I have tons of books. So things I remember from the past in a book, I'll reopen that book or I'll buy a new book. A lot of it is online, different kinds of articles, videos, podcasts, articles. Wikipedia is useful. I do try and check, of course. I don't just take it like on face value. So yeah, all kinds of things, you know. Loads of different kinds of stuff. How do they climb up the stone to carve? Well, that's where some of these square pegs around the side of the building come from. But also, if you chisel into the rock and then put a peg in and then a platform and then you chisel down, if you just keep moving that platform down along the face of it, then you have a constant platform that gets all of your trace of it gets removed. So there are these side remains on the Treasury, but there aren't remains on other tombs. So if you just go down like that, then all of your traces of workmanship, they go with you in these piles of rubble. And there are actually big piles of rubble in different canyons around Petra. So that shows that they didn't sort of magically clear all of this chipped away rock away, that a lot of it is still piled up in different areas of Petra. Yeah, thank you, guys. Oh, Dara, what do they do as free time? I don't know. There's really not that much written evidence about them. The written word about the Nabateans comes from Romans and Greeks and later Islamic scholars. And I don't know enough in detail, to be honest, to know what they did in their free time, if they had parties or played sports, or I don't know enough, sorry, to be honest. What are they best known for? Well, their building, the buildings and their trade. They became very wealthy and they built these fascinating tombs with all of this different mix of architectural styles from the known world at the time. Judy, I don't know if they had any kind of writing. They have inscriptions. There are inscriptions found in Petra, in Aramaic, their language. In terms of large scripts, I don't know, but there are inscriptions about people and deities and the reasons why some tombs were built, for example, but and for whom they were built. But in terms of large scale writing, not as far as I read, but there may be, but I don't think so yet. Colin, did you go to the night show? No, I didn't. Sorry, so I don't know if it's worth going, but I'm sure it is pretty spectacular. But yeah. Phyllis, what was their education like? Gosh, I don't know in Petra itself. Again, people don't even know if it was settled all year round. One could imagine that wealthier people may have had their children educated in places where they could be educated, like Alexandria or Rome or Greece. But again, it's a tribal people, so it's not sure if they would have had this kind of cosmopolitan outlook early on, pre-Roman. So yeah, it's such an ongoing subject. 1% of the whole site of Petra has been kind of fully excavated, 1%. So I mean, there's so much to discover. Kitty, I don't know if it's safe. I think Jordan is pretty safe, but I mean, I was there, I think 10 or 11 years ago. So I don't know, to be honest, if I can say, yep, but safe. And about political instability, again, I don't know in Jordan. I think it's one of the safer of the Middle Eastern countries, but I don't know, sorry.
So we're going to have to wrap things up. But
Yep.
Thanks everyone for joining us. And of course, special thanks to Edward for taking time out of his schedule to teach us all these cool historical places once again.
Thank you guys so much. Amazing.
Yeah, so I'll send out the email. If you're still joining us or you're still online, I'll send out an email. I won't be able to do it today because I have another appointment, but I'll try to do it like early next week with the recording, Edward's contact information, et cetera, et cetera. And Edward and I will figure out what we're going to do for the calendar in the near future.
Awesome.
So bye, everyone. Thank you. Have a great rest of your weekend. Stay safe, and hopefully we will see all of each other in person at some point
Yeah.
in the future, either in London, Petra, Washington, DC, somewhere.
Right.
Bye, everyone. Thank you. Have a
Thank
great
you, guys. Thank you so much. Yeah. Bye.